Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to a new series on my channel, a currently untitled series. I'll have to figure that out, but I am so excited for this. To give you guys a little background, I've had two ideas for clothing designs floating around in my head for a very long time, and I think now, being stuck at home, it's a great time to actually make those. And I thought that it would be interesting to document the whole process of designing the clothes, figuring out the pattern, figuring out the fabrics, prototyping it, creating garments that I can fit test on people, and hopefully fit test on people of different sizes and body types, because I think that would be really interesting. I will try to figure out a way to do that, and then actually producing the garment, sewing it. Now, I also thought it would be pretty interesting to source fabric, find a factory, and actually maybe produce a small collection. But with everything going on in the fashion industry currently, I don't think that that part is necessarily going to happen. But I still think it'd be interesting to show you guys everything else that's involved in designing and producing clothing. So this is going to be a multi-part series, and I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go or how it's going to evolve, but for today we're going to start with the design process. Now, I am sort of at a middle stage of the design process because I do already have the ideas of the garments that I would like to create. But typically a designer would start their design process with research. Now, research for most designers would involve looking at trend forecasting. You guys know how I feel about trends, so I'm not bothering with any kind of trend forecasting. And then if you're a designer for a brand, you would for sure look into what kinds of things your target market is into. And designers will also look at their brand's previous collections and what did well and what didn't do well. And quite often they'll take the pieces that sold really well and maybe just give them a few different tweaks, maybe change a sleeve, change a fabric, a color, something like that. And the next stage is collecting inspiration, and quite often designers will create a mood board of images and things that inspire them. Here is my mood board behind me. It's not a great mood board because it doesn't have a strong direction or references for designing a collection. So mine is more of just an inspiration board than a mood board for these clothes, but typically creating a mood board for the collection is a big initial step. Part of the process of creating a mood board is deciding on color stories. And so that is what sort of neutrals and what kind of seasonal colors you're going to have. And often quite a bit of research is involved in deciding on color stories because colors can really make or break a collection. If you put out pieces and maybe people love the styles but they don't love the colors, they're not gonna sell. And this is why so many brands will stick with just blacks and neutrals, because those are known to sell well. And part of this process might also involve collecting fabrics for inspiration. So I've seen designers work two different ways, where they might already have the fabrics and then they're designing clothes to use those fabrics, or they design the clothes and then find fabrics to make them out of. And another big part of the research and inspiration process, which you guys might be surprised by because I was definitely surprised by how often this is done, is you go shopping for clothes and you look for reference garments. And so like what we would do was go into stores, find pieces that you like, and then you would take them into the change room and photograph them, photograph the seams, how it was sewn together. Maybe you have your measuring tape. And a lot of designers will actually buy the garments so they can have them in their studio as reference garments while they're designing and creating the patterns. You're not recreating it. I mean, some brands definitely are knocking off and fully recreating the garments, but you're just drawing inspiration from certain elements. And if somebody has already done something that you're trying to do, there's not really a sense in completely remaking the wheel when you have an example that you can reference. So, I mean, at least in my experience and the designers I've worked with, nobody ever directly knocked things off. They just took elements from clothes and things that they liked and incorporated that into their own designs. And so for me and the two clothes that I'm designing, I do have pretty strong reference garments, and I will show those to you when I show you guys a breakdown of these clothes. And they really did inspire these pieces. So they're both pieces that I have owned and really liked certain elements from them. And so I want to take those elements and transform them into pieces that I think are going to work even better. And quite often another part of researching and collecting inspiration is looking at historical references, at cultural references, and maybe looking at other areas of art and design. So looking at artists, looking at film, looking at anything really that you find inspiring, you can really incorporate that into the design process. But for the designs that I'm going to be doing today, they definitely are a bit more, I guess, practically based and also target market based. So let's jump into talking about target market a bit. It's an extremely important part of designing clothes, is knowing who you're designing clothes for. So I actually don't think that designers spend enough time thinking about the person who is going to wear these pieces and how they can create pieces for this person that they are going to love and to use a long time. Because of course, with something like fast fashion, you know, that's not a priority. It's just a matter of getting new trends out all the time. But I think it should be an important part of the design process, is really trying to create garments that are functional and that are going to be loved and have a long life in somebody's wardrobe. So in this case, I am my own target market because I am designing the clothes for myself, but I am trying to think about it in a bit broader sense as well. So who else might want to wear these clothes? And I really want to focus on versatility with these clothes, because I also see that as being a good challenge that I want to explore, is making clothes that are really versatile in my capsule wardrobe, that can be worn different ways, that can work on different body types, because that is something that I think is important to think about. And I mean, this is going on a bit of a tangent, but quite a while ago, I did a size survey. I have a blog post up about that, which I can link. And from that, I found that people are such different sizes. Nobody fits that kind of standard breakdown of clothing sizes and, you know, measurements, how just vastly different people's body types are, and yet we only design clothes for one body type. So I really want to explore having garments that work on different body types. So that is something that I was really thinking about with these clothing concepts. And I'm trying to also be mindful of price point. Typically, if I was just making clothes for myself, that obviously wouldn't be a big consideration, but because I do kind of want to think about this as a full process and going into manufacturing, price point is really important. And price point is extremely challenging when it comes to manufacturing in an ethical and sustainable way, because fabrics cost a lot more, and if you're paying fair wages, that is going to cost a lot more. So looking at ways to maybe cut down extra sewing or extra fabric use. And in a further episode in this series, I can actually show you guys how we would break down the cost and decide on a price that something like this would retail for, so you can see everything that's involved in that as well. So after all of this research, collecting inspiration, creating mood boards, it is time to sketch. And I personally sketch a lot. I think it's really helpful. I have these garments floating around in my head, but I haven't actually put it down on paper and thought about it in a more practical way. So we're gonna do that right now. So I like using croquis when sketching because I find it really fast. So this is, I don't know how well you can see this, but this is a croquis that I made a long time ago when I was in school. And I actually kind of want to update it because, I don't know, I'm just not feeling this long legs, super tall, really skinny fashion design body anymore, but I don't really have time to go through the process of creating a whole new croquis, so I am gonna use the one that I've already made. But this is just basically a blank body that you can use to draw the clothes on top of to make that process a bit easier. So the first piece that I'm drawing is this dress, which is really inspired by this 1950s pattern. I made this dress and I thought it was a really cool pattern because the dress actually goes over your head. I've always really liked the style of this dress, but it was highly inflexible because it had buttons in the front, it had a button in the back, it fit quite tightly. And for the longest time, I've been thinking about this over the head style of dress, but have it work, just function a bit differently. And I came up with this idea of using a tie and elastics and gathers. And so as I'm sketching in my head, I'm just playing around with different things like necklines, how the tie would work, what sort of length I would want on this dress, and also thinking about how it's actually going to fasten together. Starting to think about things like how I'm going to actually finish the edges, how is it going to be hemmed, what kinds of fabric I would want to use for something like this. So do I want something that's really light and airy and flowy, or something with a bit more substance and weight to it? So what I've kind of finally settled on is I do want it to have a bit of a scoop neckline, but not too low, because I think if the neckline is quite wide, it might create issues with it sliding back or sliding forward. That's gonna be something that I'll have to play around with the sample. And I'm also gonna try to see if I can make this dress reversible. I decided I also want the tie to have quite a bit of drape and substance to it, but I don't want it to be super thick and bulky. I'm gonna have to get different fabric samples and really play around with how they drape, how they tie. So this is the first design that I've settled on. And the next design is this jumpsuit with a tie wrap top. Now, I'm not fully sure if this is actually gonna work out, so it's something that I'm gonna have to prototype and test, and we'll see if it actually works. But I was really inspired by the way that the Matter Prints jumpsuit pants are, because they have this really cool little button on the side that allows you to adjust the fit. And I thought that it would be so cool to have that sort of pair of pants, but with a top that you were able to actually cross and wrap as well. So again, with a design like this, I do want the fabric to probably be pretty lightweight, especially the top. I think that it for sure needs some stretch, possibly even to be a knit, which would give you a lot of stretch and flexibility with it. But I wouldn't want the pants necessarily to be a knit, so we'd be talking about sewing a knit and a woven together. And there's also the thought of, do I want the top and the bottom to look like they're separate, so be made out of different kinds of fabric, or do we want to make it all the same color so it looks like one piece? And this kind of design doesn't really work well planning it out as a sketch. It really needs to be draped on a mannequin, so that's gonna be my next step. Okay, so we have the dressmaker's dummy here. I wanna make sure that it is gonna work the way that I think it will, or the way that I want it to, and also to just play around with some different ideas on the dummy. So I have some fabric here. This is a pretty lightweight knit, which is something similar probably that I'm gonna wanna use. So I'm also finding here that if I put it perfectly in line perpendicular to the body this way, then if you try to bring it up, it creates a lot of extra fabric along here. So I'm thinking that it's gonna have to actually attach to the edge of the pants in some kind of diagonal. So I'm gonna have to play around with exactly what angle of diagonal works well with that. Because I only have one half of it on right now, I'm just thinking about things like if I were to tie it, you know, in a knot here, or twist them with each other and then pull it back around, if that would work. And so what I am learning from this process is that I will definitely need a fabric that is pretty stretchy and pretty lightweight, because I don't want it to be very bulky, and it has to be very flexible with being able to, you know, go over all of the different body's curves. So this is very rudimentary draping, just kind of playing around a tiny bit to see if some of the ideas that are in my head might actually work, and some of them seem to, some of them don't. But really we'll just have to make a sample to see how it actually fits and works on a body. Okay, so now that I have my two designs figured out a bit better, I'm gonna create what's called a technical flat. So this is a much more precise drawing. It shows exactly the proportions, it shows all the seams, where things are attached, you know, where buttons go, all the little design details that you need to know when you're creating the pattern. This I'm gonna create on the computer, and this is really gonna provide that blueprint for me to make the pattern from. And then this technical flat would also be updated and would be sent to the factory along with the tech pack if I was to manufacture this. So that is the first stage of this process, and in the next episode of this series, I'm gonna be making the patterns for these clothes and show you guys how that works. And even if you're not at all a sewer or designer or anything like that, I still hope that this is really interesting for you. I think it's important to know and have a bit of an understanding of everything that's involved in making clothing, and why fast fashion is often very questionably cheap. So anyways, I would love to hear what you guys think of this series in the comments. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much to those of you supporting me on Patreon. Seriously, your support, especially during this time, is so very much appreciated and helps keep this channel running. And yeah, I will see you guys in another video. I don't know if my next video will be the next one in this series, just because these do take quite a bit of time to film. But anyways, yeah, I will see you guys hopefully soon. Okay, bye.